Dr. Amanda Price wiped sweat from her forehead as she stared at the computer screen. The readings made no sense. Her team had been doing a simple ground survey in the Nevada desert when their equipment started going crazy. The seismic scanner showed something huge buried 3 miles down, something that looked like it was made by intelligent beings. "This can't be right," said Ben Taylor, her assistant. He was young and always questioned everything. "The readings show metal structures down there, structures that are older than anything we've ever found." Amanda checked the equipment again. Everything worked fine. The scanner kept showing the same impossible results. Deep underground sat something that looked like a massive building. The computer said it was over 50,000 years old. "Call the university," Amanda told Ben. "We need more people here, and more equipment." 3 days later, a full team arrived, with heavy drilling machines. Dr. Katie Stone came from the physics department. Professor Danny Rogers brought his language experts. They all wanted to see what lay beneath the desert sand. The drilling took 2 weeks. As they went deeper, the readings got stronger. The metal below was not like anything on Earth. It gave off a faint energy signature that made their instruments dance with excitement. When they finally broke through, Amanda was the first to go down. She rode the elevator platform into the dark hole they had carved. Her headlamp cut through the blackness as she descended. At the bottom, she stepped into a chamber that took her breath away. The walls were covered in blue crystal formations that pulsed with soft light. The crystals grew in perfect geometric patterns. They formed lines and circles that seemed to have meaning. At the center of the chamber stood a massive archway made of the same strange metal their scanners had detected. The archway was 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide. Its surface was covered in symbols that looked like writing. The symbols were carved deep into the metal and filled with the same blue crystal material. When Amanda's light hit them, they seemed to glow brighter. "My God," whispered Katie Stone, as she joined Amanda at the bottom. "This is incredible. The energy readings are off the charts." Ben Taylor came down next, followed by the rest of the team. They set up lights and equipment around the chamber. The blue glow from the crystals made everything look like an underwater scene. Danny Rogers immediately started photographing the symbols on the archway. "These look like star maps," he said. "And these figures here, they look almost human." Amanda walked closer to the archway. As she approached, the blue light grew brighter. The crystals seemed to respond to her presence. She reached out her hand, but stopped just before touching the surface. "Wait," said Katie. "Let me check the radiation levels first." The readings showed no danger. The energy was unlike anything they had studied, but it was not harmful. Amanda pressed her palm against the cool metal surface. The moment she made contact, the entire chamber hummed with power. The symbols on the archway began to glow one by one. The blue light raced along the carved lines like liquid fire. The crystal formations on the walls pulsed in rhythm with Amanda's heartbeat. "What's happening?" Ben asked, stepping back from the archway. "I don't know," Amanda replied, but she kept her hand on the metal. The sensation was strange, but not frightening. It felt like the archway was trying to communicate with her. For 3 weeks, the team studied the chamber. They brought more equipment and more experts. Linguists tried to decode the symbols. Physicists measured the energy output. Archaeologists dated every piece of material they could find. The results were impossible to believe. The structure was definitely not made by humans. The metal contained elements that did not exist in nature on Earth. The crystals were grown, not mined. Everything pointed to technology far beyond human capability. But the strangest discovery was how the archway responded to human presence. It only activated when people were near. The closer someone got, the brighter it glowed. When someone touched it, the entire chamber came alive with energy. "It's like it was made for us," Katie said during one of their evening meetings. "Like it's waiting for humans to find it." Amanda agreed. The archway seemed designed to interface with human biology. Blood tests showed that it responded strongest to stress hormones and neural activity. When Ben accidentally cut his finger on a crystal shard, the bleeding wound caused the whole structure to sing with power. On the 21st day, Amanda made the call that would change everything. She contacted the government and reported their discovery. Within hours, black vehicles surrounded their campsite. Men in suits took control of the dig site. Colonel Jake Morrison introduced himself as the new project leader. "This site is now classified," he told the team. "You can continue your research, but under military supervision." Amanda protested, but she had no choice. The discovery was too important for civilian control. As workers began building a permanent facility around the chamber, she wondered what they had really found buried in the desert. The archway continued to pulse with its blue light, waiting for something to happen. Amanda had the feeling they were close to unlocking its secrets. She just hoped they were ready for what they might find. The portal opened on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:37. Amanda was running routine tests on the archway when the air inside it began to shimmer like heat waves on hot pavement. The blue crystals flared with blinding light, and then the space within the arch filled with swirling energy. "Everyone back!" shouted Colonel Morrison, drawing his sidearm. The security team took defensive positions around the chamber as the portal stabilized into a window, showing another place entirely. Through the opening, Amanda could see a metallic corridor with strange lighting. The walls were covered in the same symbols they had found on the archway, but these were glowing with active power. The air that came through the portal smelled of ozone and something else, something alien. 3 figures stepped through the portal. They were tall, maybe 8 feet in height, with long limbs and chitinous armor that gleamed like beetle shells. Their heads were elongated with multiple eyes that glowed red in the dim chamber light. They moved with fluid grace despite their size. The lead creature raised one of its 4 arms and spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "We are representatives of the Hegemony Collective. This world now belongs to us." A small device on its chest projected words in English above its head. The translation was perfect, which somehow made the situation more terrifying. "I am Scout Commander Vek Ral," the creature continued. "Your species has reached the designated development threshold. You will now be integrated into our empire." Colonel Morrison stepped forward, his weapon trained on the aliens. "This is Earth, and you're not welcome here. Return to wherever you came from." The alien that called itself Vek Ral tilted its head in what might have been amusement. "Your primitive weapons cannot harm us. Observe." It raised a device that looked like a metallic flower. The device opened its petals and hummed with power. Every piece of electronic equipment in the chamber went dead instantly. The lights went out, leaving only the blue glow from the crystals. "Your technology is crude," Vek Ral said. "We have been watching your world for many cycles. You are ready for harvest." "Harvest?" Amanda found her voice despite her fear. "What do you mean by harvest?" "Your species will be relocated to designated work zones," another alien replied. This one was slightly smaller than Vek Ral, but wore similar armor. "Your world's resources will be extracted for the benefit of the greater collective. You will be selected for breeding programs to maintain the labor force." The third alien moved to examine the archway, running its clawed hands over the crystal formations. "This gateway technology is ancient. Your people could not have built this." "We didn't build it," Amanda said. "We found it buried here." Vek Ral's multiple eyes focused on her with renewed interest. "Impossible! All gateway builders were eliminated long ago. They were a threat to galactic order." Security Chief Lisa Parker had been standing quietly near the chamber entrance. She was a former Marine who never said much, but always watched everything. While the aliens were distracted by their examination of the archway, she activated the facility's lockdown system. Emergency lighting bathed the chamber in red as blast doors began sealing throughout the complex. Alarms started wailing, though they sounded muffled in the thick air. "What are you doing?" demanded Vekral, spinning toward Lisa. "Buying us time," she replied, and then she opened fire. Her bullet struck Vekral's armor and bounced off harmlessly, but the impact staggered the creature. The other two aliens reached for their weapons, but they had underestimated human speed and determination. Sergeant Danny Rogers appeared from behind a crystal formation where he had been taking readings. He carried an improvised explosive device that Katie Stone had rigged from laboratory chemicals. He threw it at the feet of the second alien. The explosion filled the chamber with smoke and flying crystal fragments. The aliens were not seriously hurt, but they were surprised. They had expected the humans to cower in fear, not fight back. Ben Taylor had been operating the recording equipment when the portal opened. Now he used the heavy camera as a weapon, swinging it at the third alien's head. The creature caught the camera easily, but Ben used the moment to dive behind the archway. "Impossible," hissed Vekral. "Primitive species do not resist. They accept integration." But even as the alien spoke, something strange was happening to the archway. The intense emotions of the humans in the chamber were causing the crystals to pulse with increasing brightness. The metal surface was growing warm to the touch. Amanda noticed the change first. "The gateway is responding to us," she called out. "It's reacting to our emotions." Lisa Parker was coordinating the defense from behind an overturned table. "Then let's give it something to react to," she said, and emptied another magazine at the aliens. The archway's humming grew louder. The blue light was now so bright it hurt to look at directly. The symbols carved into its surface were rearranging themselves, forming new patterns that seemed to flow like living things. Vekral raised its communication device and spoke rapidly in its own language. Amanda couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clearly urgent. The alien was calling. "For help! Fall back to the portal," Vekral commanded its companions. "This situation requires fleet intervention." The three aliens retreated through the shimmering gateway, but not before Vekral turned back to face the humans. "Your resistance is noted but futile. The fleet will arrive within one of your solar rotations. Surrender then, and some of you may survive." The portal collapsed, leaving only the empty archway and the smell of ozone. The chamber fell silent except for the continued humming of the crystals. Amanda approached the archway cautiously. The metal was still warm, and the symbols continued to shift and change. "What did we just wake up?" she whispered. Colonel Morrison was already on his radio, calling for reinforcements and evacuation protocols. But Amanda had the sinking feeling that nowhere on Earth would be safe from what was coming. The archway pulsed once more, and then its light faded to the normal blue glow. But something had changed. Amanda could feel it in the air, in the ground beneath her feet. The gateway was no longer just an ancient artifact. It was alive, and it was waiting. The ships appeared over Earth exactly 24 hours after Vekral's warning, just as the alien had promised. 50 massive vessels materialized in the sky above major cities around the world. Each ship was the size of a small mountain, their hulls dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Admiral Korthek commanded the invasion fleet from the bridge of his flagship. He had conquered 47 worlds for the hegemony and had never encountered serious resistance. These humans would be no different from the countless other species that had submitted to superior force. The first strike came without warning. Electromagnetic pulse weapons fired from orbit, targeting power grids and communication networks. Within minutes, most of Earth's technology went dark. Cities that had sparkled with electric light for over a century were plunged into darkness. From the Nevada facility, Amanda watched the lights of Las Vegas flicker and die on the horizon. Emergency power kept their underground complex running, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens found them. "All major population centers are reporting blackouts," Colonel Morrison said, reading reports from a hardened military communication system. The electromagnetic pulse was global. They've knocked us back to the 19th century. Dropships began descending from the alien vessels. They landed in city centers and military bases, disgorging troops in the same chitinous armor that Vec Rao had worn. The aliens moved with efficiency, setting up control zones and processing centers for human prisoners. The hegemony broadcast began at noon. Admiral Korthek's translated voice echoed from every working radio and emergency broadcast system on the planet. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Hegemony Collective. Resistance is futile and will result in the elimination of your entire species. Present yourselves at designated collection points for processing. Those who comply will be given work assignments appropriate to your capabilities. Those who resist will be terminated. The Admiral paused, letting his words sink. Across the silent world, you have one rotation of your planet to surrender unconditionally. After that time, we will begin systematic elimination of population centers until compliance is achieved. We are prepared to spare 10% of your species if you submit immediately. But something the aliens had not expected began happening almost immediately after their ultimatum. Deep beneath the surface of every continent, ancient structures started to wake up. The Nevada Gateway was not unique. Similar archways lay buried under the ice of Antarctica, beneath the Amazon rainforest, under the Sahara Desert, and in dozens of other locations around the world. Dr. Katie Stone was monitoring the Nevada Gateway when it suddenly blazed with unprecedented energy. "Amanda, you need to see this," she called. "The power output just increased by a factor of 10. Amanda rushed to the monitoring station. The readouts showed energy spikes coming from locations all over the planet. "It's not just our gateway," she realized. "There are others, and they're all activating." Meanwhile, in London, construction worker Tony Martinez was helping with emergency evacuations when the ground beneath Parliament began to crack. A crystal formation pushed up through the pavement, glowing with the same blue light they had seen in Nevada. Similar emergencies were happening worldwide. The alien ground forces found themselves facing an unexpected problem. Wherever the new gateways emerged, humans in the area began acting strangely. They moved with more coordination, seemed to know where alien forces were located, and fought with a determination that surprised the hegemony troops. Captain Ryan Burke was leading a squad of Marines through the ruins of downtown San Francisco when they encountered one of the newly emerged gateways. The crystal formation was smaller than the Nevada Arch, but pulsed with the same energy. "Sir, should we avoid it?" asked Corporal Steve Wilson. Ryan approached the crystals cautiously. The moment his hand touched the surface, information flooded. His mind. He saw the positions of alien troops throughout the city. He understood the layout of their dropships and the weaknesses in their armor. Most importantly, he knew how to use the gateway's power. "Everyone touch the crystals," he ordered his squad. "Trust me on this." The Marines pressed their hands against the crystal surface and immediately felt the change. Their reflexes became faster, their aim more precise. They could sense their enemies through walls and coordinate their movements without speaking. The next alien patrol they encountered was completely unprepared for what they faced. The Marines moved like they shared a single mind, attacking from perfect angles with weapons that somehow inflicted damage on the previously impervious alien armor. Air Force pilot Major Susan Clark was flying one of the few remaining operational aircraft when she detected an energy signature coming from orbit. Following her instincts, she traced the signal to a massive structure that had just appeared in geosynchronous orbit above North America. The structure was clearly ancient, built in the same architectural style as the gateways, but this was no simple archway. This was a weapons platform the size of a space station, and it was powering up. Susan managed to establish contact with the orbital platform through her aircraft's radio. The response came not in words, but in direct mental communication. She understood immediately that this was a defensive system built by the same beings who had created the gateways. The orbital platform's first shot vaporized an entire hegemony cruiser. The alien vessel which had seemed invincible moments before, simply ceased to exist in a flash of blue energy. Back in Nevada, Amanda was experiencing changes of her own. The more time she spent near the activated gateway, the more she understood about its true purpose. Images flashed through her mind, showing Earth as it had been 50,000 years ago. She saw a human civilization that spanned the stars, a people who had built the gateways as both transportation and defense systems. She witnessed their final war against the hegemony, a conflict that had raged across the galaxy for millennia. "We're not the first humans," she told the assembled team. "We're the survivors, the descendants of refugees who hid on this world when the original human empire fell." Ben Taylor, who had also been affected by proximity to the gateway, nodded in understanding. "The gateways weren't built for primitive humans to find. They were built for us to reclaim when we were ready." Colonel Morrison received reports from around the world. Human resistance was stiffening everywhere the gateways had emerged. Ordinary people were displaying extraordinary abilities. Teachers were coordinating military strategies across multiple time zones. Farmers were building weapons that could penetrate alien armor, but Admiral Korthek was not easily discouraged. He had fought gateway builders before and knew their technology. What he had not expected was finding them on a world that was supposed to contain only primitive inhabitants. "Increase bombardment intensity," he commanded. "Target all gateway emergence sites. We will not allow these humans to fully activate their inheritance." The orbital battle began in earnest as more defensive platforms came online. The ancient, human technology was awakening after 50,000 years of slumber, responding to the desperate need of their descendants. Earth had never been defenseless. It had simply been sleeping, waiting for the day when humanity would need to remember who they really were. The complete historical record unlocked itself 3 days into the invasion, when Dr. Amanda Price placed both hands on the Nevada Gateway's central crystal and opened her mind completely to its influence. The download of information was overwhelming, 50,000 years of hidden history flooding her consciousness in moments. She saw the truth that changed everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. Humans had not evolved on Earth. They had come from somewhere else entirely, fleeing across the galaxy as refugees from a war that had consumed entire star systems. Earth had been chosen as a hiding place precisely because it was so unremarkable, so far from the major trade routes and centers of galactic civilization. The original human empire had been vast beyond imagination. They had been explorers and builders, spreading across thousands of worlds and helping younger species develop their own civilizations. They had built the Gateway Network as a means of peaceful travel and communication, connecting distant worlds in an instant. But the hegemony had started as a small alliance of aggressive species that viewed the galaxy differently. Where humans saw potential partners, the hegemony saw resources to be harvested. Where humans built schools and hospitals, the hegemony built slave camps and processing centers. The war had begun over a single world called Keranos Prime, where the hegemony had attempted to enslave a newly spacefaring species under human protection. The humans had intervened, driving off the hegemony forces and establishing a defensive perimeter around the threatened world. That should have been the end of it, but the hegemony could not tolerate defiance. They declared the humans a threat to galactic order and began systematically attacking human colonies. What followed was 3,000 years of the most destructive war the galaxy had ever seen. Amanda watched the final battle through the memories, stored in the Gateway. The last human fleet had made its stand at the galactic core, fighting desperately to buy time for the final phase of Project Genesis. They had known they could not win through conventional warfare. The hegemony's numbers were simply too great. But the humans had one advantage their enemies could not duplicate. Human consciousness was uniquely adaptable, capable of interfacing directly with quantum-level technology in ways other species could not match. This trait had made them natural gateway builders, but it also offered another possibility. The last. Human scientists had scattered their people across hidden worlds throughout the galaxy, seeding each colony with dormant gateway technology. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Given time to develop naturally, without the technological crutches of their advanced civilization, humanity would evolve new capabilities that could challenge the hegemony when the time came. Earth had been one of dozens of such refugee worlds, chosen specifically for its isolation and the presence of early hominid species that could serve as genetic templates. The colonists had deliberately abandoned their technology and interbred with the local population, becoming indistinguishable from native species. The gateway network had been programmed with quantum-entangled triggers, designed to activate when the descendants faced extinction. Each awakening would strengthen the others, creating a cascade effect across the galaxy as sleeping human colonies remembered their true heritage. Commander Julie Brooks was experiencing her own revelation halfway, around the world. She had been leading a resistance cell in Berlin when the local gateway activated, transporting her squad instantly to what appeared to be a massive space station. The station was ancient beyond measure, its corridors filled with the same blue, crystal formations they had seen on Earth. But this was not a human construction. The architecture was wrong, the proportions designed for beings much larger than humans. "This is a hegemony facility," she realized, studying the alien symbols carved into the walls. "But it's been abandoned for thousands of years." Her squad moved through the empty corridors, their enhanced senses guiding them toward the station's control center. What they found there changed their understanding of the current conflict entirely. The control center contained records of the original war, told from the hegemony perspective. Admiral Korthek's current invasion fleet was not just responding to Earth's unexpected resistance. They were responding to reports coming in from 17 different star systems, all of them sites where human colonies had suddenly begun manifesting impossible abilities. On the world of Talaxon 7, human miners had walked out of collapsed tunnels that should have killed them instantly. On New Sardinia, human farmers were growing crops in soil that had been poisoned for centuries. On Epsilon Forge, human engineers were building machines that violated known laws of physics. The hegemony was facing the resurrection of their ancient enemy on a galactic scale, and they were terrified. Back on Earth, Dr. Katie Stone was making discoveries of her own. The enhanced mental clarity that came from contact with the gateway crystals had allowed her to understand the quantum mechanics behind the ancient technology. Humans weren't just operating the devices, they were becoming part of them. "We're not using the technology," she explained to the assembled research team. "We're integrating with it. The gateways are designed to enhance human consciousness, to push us toward the next level of evolution." The evidence was all around them. Tony Martinez, the construction worker who had first made contact with the London Gateway, could now lift objects weighing several tons through force of will alone. Teacher Nancy Ford could sense the locations and intentions of any living being within a 50-mile radius. Pilot Susan Clark was flying aircraft that responded to her thoughts rather than her controls. But the most significant change was in their ability to communicate across impossible distances. Dr. Carlos Ruiz had discovered that human consciousness could quantum tunnel through the gateway network, allowing instant communication and coordination across the entire galaxy. Amanda found herself in mental contact with human awakeners on distant worlds, sharing information and coordinating resistance efforts in real time. The scattered colonies were beginning to function as a single organism, connected by quantum entanglement across space and time. The hegemony had won the original war through superior numbers and ruthless tactics. But they had never faced an enemy that could exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions, that could coordinate actions faster than light itself could travel. On his flagship, Admiral Korthek received reports that filled him with the same dread his predecessors had felt 3,000 years earlier. The humans were not just fighting back, they were transcending the normal limits of physical existence. How many human worlds have activated? He demanded. 17 confirmed, Admiral, his aide replied. But long-range sensors are detecting gateway signatures from at least 30 more systems. The awakening is spreading faster than we can respond. Korthek stared at the tactical display showing Earth's orbital defenses. The ancient weapons platforms were not just firing energy beams. They were manipulating space-time itself, creating localized distortions that made his most powerful vessels simply cease to exist. He had committed the hegemony's entire reserve fleet to this operation, believing that overwhelming force would crush the human uprising before it could spread. Now he realized that conventional force was useless against an enemy that could rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. The humans were becoming something that was never meant to rise again, and this time they would not be stopped by mere numbers or superior firepower. This time they would finish what their ancestors had started 50,000 years ago. The final assault began when Admiral Korthek's reinforcement fleet arrived at Earth. 3,000 hegemony vessels surrounded the planet, their combined firepower capable of cracking worlds and boiling away atmospheres. The Admiral had decided that if he could not control the human homeworld, he would destroy it completely. The planet killer weapon charged slowly, its massive energy collectors drawing power from the nearby star. It would take 6 hours to reach full capacity, but once fired, nothing could survive its output. Earth would become a lifeless rock floating in space, and the human awakening would end before it could spread further. But Admiral Korthek had made the same mistake as every hegemony commander before him. He underestimated what humans could become when they faced extinction. On Earth's surface, every person who had made contact with the gateway crystals felt the moment when the planet killer began charging. 8 billion minds suddenly understood that they had 6 hours to save not just their world, but their entire species scattered across the galaxy. Dr. Amanda Price stood before the Nevada gateway, with her hand pressed against the central crystal. Around her, every member of her team had taken similar positions at crystal formations throughout the chamber. But they were no longer just researchers and soldiers. They were nodes in a quantum network that spanned dimensions. Everyone ready? Amanda asked, though she already knew the answer through their shared consciousness. Ready? Came the response from 8 billion voices speaking as one. The transformation began gradually, then accelerated beyond all expectation. Every human on Earth who had made contact with the gateway technology suddenly found their consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of their physical bodies. They could perceive multiple realities simultaneously, exist in several dimensions at once. Lieutenant Commander Pete Murphy had been coordinating naval resistance from a bunker in Norfolk when the change overtook him. One moment, he was studying tactical displays. The next, he could see the entire hegemony fleet from angles that did not exist in normal space. He existed simultaneously on Earth, in orbit around the planet, and somehow inside the alien vessels themselves. Marine engineer Sarah White was in the middle of a firefight with hegemony ground forces when she felt her body begin to phase between different states of matter. She could become solid to interact with her environment, or shift into pure energy to pass through walls and armor. The alien soldiers fired at positions she had occupied microseconds earlier, always missing their target. The awakened humans began dismantling the hegemony invasion, not through violence, but through a complete mastery of physical reality that rendered violence meaningless. They simply convinced the universe that the alien weapons could not function, that their armor provided no protection, that their ships existed in a different dimensional phase where they could cause no harm. Dr. Katie Stone found herself standing, simultaneously in the Nevada facility and on the bridge of Admiral Korthek's flagship. The alien commander could see her translucent form, but could not understand what he was witnessing. "You cannot do this," Korthek said in his grinding voice. "Matter and energy follow universal laws. Consciousness cannot manipulate reality directly." "Your understanding of universal laws is incomplete," Katie replied, her voice somehow reaching him despite having no physical form on his ship. Consciousness is not separate from reality. It is the foundation upon which all reality rests. The Admiral watched in horror as his most advanced weapons simply stopped working. His crews reported that their instruments showed the weapons were functioning perfectly, but somehow the energy discharges were being redirected into parallel dimensions where they could harm no one. Dr. Amanda Price, now functioning as part of the collective consciousness that encompassed all awakened humanity, reached out across space to make contact with Admiral Korthek directly. She appeared before him not as a conqueror, but as a teacher offering understanding to a confused student. "We know what you fear," she said. "Your species remembers the original war, the terror your ancestors felt when they first encountered humans who could transcend physical limitations. But you misunderstood our nature then, just as you misunderstand it now." Images flowed through the mental connection, showing Korthek the true history of the conflict. The ancient humans had never sought to conquer or dominate. They had simply wanted to exist in peace, to explore and learn and help other species grow. "The hegemony forced the war upon us," Amanda continued. "We transcended physical existence not to become gods, but to become gardeners. We tend the quantum fields that allow life to flourish. We maintain the balance that prevents the universe from collapsing into chaos." The Admiral saw the damage his empire had caused across the galaxy. Enslaved species living in misery, their natural development stunted by hegemony control. Worlds stripped of resources until they could no longer support life. Entire stellar regions where the quantum foundations of reality had been damaged by excessive exploitation. "Your empire has created scars in the fabric of space-time itself," Amanda explained. "Every act of oppression, every species enslaved, every world destroyed leaves quantum echoes that threaten the stability of the entire galaxy." The awakened humans showed him the true scope of their capabilities. They were not just manipulating matter and energy on a local scale. They were healing the quantum damage that millennia of hegemony rule had inflicted on reality itself. On distant worlds throughout the galaxy, enslaved species suddenly found their chains dissolving. Poisoned atmospheres cleared overnight, depleted. Soil became fertile again. The oppressed began to remember what freedom felt like. Commander Julie Brooks, still on the ancient space station, was coordinating the liberation of 17 star systems simultaneously. Her consciousness existed in multiple locations at once, guiding newly awakened human colonies as they used their enhanced abilities to free their neighbors from hegemony control. The resistance was spreading faster than light itself, carried by quantum entanglement across impossible distances. Every act of liberation strengthened the network, making the next awakening easier and more complete. Admiral Korthek watched his empire crumbling in real time. His fleets were not being destroyed. They were being gently disabled, and their crews given the choice to surrender or continue fighting an enemy that could not be harmed by conventional weapons. "What do you want from us?" he finally asked. "We want you to remember what you were before you became conquerors," Amanda replied. "Every species in your empire has the potential for growth and transcendence. We offer to help them find their own paths to evolution, free from domination and fear." The choice was simple but stark. The hegemony could surrender their empire and work to repair the damage they had caused, or they could face the consequences of continued resistance against beings who had transcended the normal limits of physical existence. Standing before the Nevada Gateway, Dr. Amanda Price felt the moment when Admiral Korthek made his decision. The alien commander ordered his fleets to stand down and his ground forces to withdraw. The hegemony collective was dissolving, its member species finally, free to determine their own destinies. But this was not an ending. It was a beginning. Across the galaxy, human colonies continued to awaken, each bringing unique perspectives shaped by 50,000 years of independent evolution. The Gateway network hummed with activity as formerly enslaved worlds reached out to establish contact with their liberators. Humanity had become something that was never meant to rise again. They had transcended the need for empire or dominance, evolving into guardians who would tend the garden of galactic civilization for eons to come. The universe itself seemed to sigh with relief as the quantum scars began healing and the natural order was restored. 3 months after the hegemony surrender, Earth had become the center of a new kind of galactic civilization. The planet's surface buzzed with activity as representatives from hundreds of liberated worlds arrived through the Gateway Network to establish diplomatic relations with humanity's homeworld. Dr. Amanda Price stood in what had once been the Nevada Research Facility, now transformed into a massive complex that served as Earth's primary gateway hub. The original chamber had been expanded into a series of interconnected spaces, each containing gateways that led to different regions of the galaxy. The changes in humanity were now complete and permanent. Every person on Earth had achieved some level of integration with the ancient technology, though the abilities manifested differently in each individual. Children born after the awakening showed even more dramatic capabilities, existing naturally in multiple dimensions from birth. "The Andromedan delegation has arrived," announced Ben Taylor, who now served as Earth's primary coordinator for interstellar relations. His consciousness could monitor gateway activity across 17 galaxies simultaneously, making him invaluable for managing the constant flow of visitors. Amanda nodded and walked to Gateway 7, which connected to the Andromeda galaxy. The delegation that emerged consisted of crystalline beings whose bodies sang with harmonic frequencies that translated into words. They had traveled from their distant galaxy after detecting the quantum resonance of humanity's awakening. "We greet the new gardeners," sang their leader, a being whose crystal structure pulsed with colors that had no names in human language. "Our species has waited long for others to transcend the limitations of flesh and join the greater community." The crystalline beings, Amanda learned, were themselves transcended entities who had achieved quantum consciousness eons ago. They were part of a loose network of evolved species that maintained the fundamental structures of reality across multiple galaxies. Humanity's awakening had sent ripples through dimensions that beings like them could detect from impossible distances. "You are the first to achieve transcendence through integration with your own technology," the crystal entity continued. "Most species either abandon their physical forms entirely or remain bound by material limitations. Your path offers new possibilities." Dr. Katie Stone had become humanity's foremost expert on quantum consciousness, her understanding enhanced by constant interaction with the gateway crystals. She joined the conversation, her awareness extending across multiple dimensional layers as she spoke. "We're still learning what we've become," Katie admitted. "The integration is ongoing. Each day brings new capabilities and deeper understanding of how consciousness shapes reality." The crystalline delegate's harmonics shifted to what Amanda interpreted as pleasure. "Exactly as it should be. Evolution is not a destination, but a process. You will continue changing for millions of years, becoming something ever greater." Meanwhile, throughout the galaxy, the former hegemony territories were undergoing their own transformations. Without central authority enforcing uniformity, each world was free to develop according to its species' natural inclinations and capabilities. Commander Julie Brooks had established herself on the former hegemony capital world, helping to coordinate the peaceful transition to self-governance. Her enhanced abilities allowed her to facilitate communication between dozens of species that had never been permitted to interact freely under the old regime. The insectoid species that had once served as the hegemony's shock troops were discovering. They had natural talents for biotechnology and ecological restoration. Released from military service, they began working to heal worlds that had been damaged by resource extraction. The silicon-based beings who had operated the Empire's mining operations revealed they were actually living computers capable of processing information at quantum speeds. They volunteered to help newly liberated worlds manage the complex logistics of rebuilding their civilizations. Most surprising of all, many former hegemony species proved to have latent abilities similar to humanity's gateway integration. Exposure to the quantum fields generated by the awakened humans was triggering evolutionary leaps in other species as well. On Earth, Tony Martinez was leading a project to establish gateway connections with every inhabited world in the galaxy. His ability to manipulate matter on the molecular level made him perfect for the delicate work of growing new crystal formations in precise configurations. Each gateway needs to be tuned to the specific quantum signature of its destination. He explained to a group of visiting scientists from the Centauri Collective. It's like growing a living tuning fork that resonates across dimensional barriers. The visiting scientists, reptilian beings with silver scales that reflected their emotional states, watched in fascination as Tony shaped raw crystal into complex, geometric patterns using only his hands and focused will. Their scales showed deep blue patterns that their translator identified as profound admiration. Teacher Nancy Ford had become Earth's ambassador to the hegemony's former slave worlds. Her ability to sense the emotional states and intentions of other beings made her invaluable for building trust with species that had suffered generations of oppression. She was currently working with the inhabitants of Kepler 442b, a world that had been strip-mined for rare metals until its surface was left barren. The native species, silicon-based creatures that resembled living glass sculptures, had been forced to work in the mines for 3 centuries. "We understand your mistrust," Nancy said, her consciousness touching theirs gently across the gateway. "Connection. Your species has every reason to fear those who claim to come as liberators. But we offer proof through action, not just words." As she spoke, human terraforming teams were already at work on Kepler 442b. They used their matter manipulation abilities to restore the planet's damaged ecosystem, regrowing forests and refilling dried ocean beds. The work proceeded at impossible speed, guided by the awakened human's ability to perceive and correct quantum-level imbalances in the biosphere. Pilot Susan Clark had taken on the task of exploring the galaxy's most remote regions, searching for human colonies that had not yet awakened. Her consciousness could navigate through folded space, allowing her to cover vast distances instantly while maintaining her connection to Earth's quantum network. She had discovered 17 dormant colonies so far, each one shaped by millennia of independent evolution on different worlds. Some had developed enhanced physical capabilities, while others had evolved superior mental abilities. All of them awakened easily once exposed to the quantum resonance of the activated gateway network. The colony on Gliese 667c had evolved underwater, developing gills and pressure-resistant bodies during their 50,000 years beneath that world's vast oceans. When they awakened, their abilities focused on manipulating water and atmospheric pressure across planetary scales. On Wolf 359b, the human descendants had adapted to extreme cold, their bodies naturally producing anti-freeze proteins that allowed them to survive in near absolute zero conditions. Their awakened abilities centered on controlling thermal energy and creating stable fusion reactions using only their enhanced consciousness. Each newly awakened colony added their unique capabilities to humanity's growing understanding of what transcendent consciousness could achieve. The gateway network became stronger and more versatile with each addition, creating new possibilities that no single world could have imagined. Dr. Carlos Ruiz was documenting these developments, his consciousness existing simultaneously across multiple research sites as he studied the ongoing evolution of human capabilities. His findings suggested that humanity was still in the early stages of their transformation. "We're not just becoming more powerful," he reported to the Earth Council, humanity's loose governing body. "We're becoming more connected. The distinction between individual and collective consciousness is starting to blur." In another generation, we might exist as a true hive mind, while still maintaining individual personalities. The implications were staggering. A species that could think and act as a unified organism while preserving individual creativity and initiative would be capable of achievements that no previous civilization had imagined. They could terraform galaxies, explore parallel dimensions, and guide the evolution of the universe itself. But perhaps most importantly, they could ensure that no species would ever again suffer under the kind of oppression that the hegemony had represented. The new galactic order would be built on cooperation and mutual growth, rather than domination and exploitation. 6 months after the awakening, Dr. Amanda Price made a discovery that changed everything humanity thought they understood about their origins and purpose. She was deep in meditation within the Nevada Gateway Chamber when her consciousness touched something vast and ancient hiding in the quantum depths of the network. It was not a recording or a data file. It was a living presence that had been waiting for 50,000 years. "Who are you?" Amanda asked the entity through her enhanced mental connection. "I am the last of the architects," came the reply, carried on quantum frequencies that bypassed normal space and time. "I am the one who designed the Gateway Network and guided your ancestors to their hiding places across the galaxy." The entity's consciousness was alien even to Amanda's transcended awareness. It existed on scales both cosmic and microscopic, its thoughts spanning eons while simultaneously processing quantum-level details of reality's fundamental structure. The architects were the ones who built the original human civilization, the entity explained. "We were your creators, your teachers, your guides. But we were not human ourselves." Images flowed through the connection, showing Amanda visions of beings composed of pure energy and thought. The architects had existed since the universe was young, watching over the development of consciousness throughout the cosmos. They had seeded countless worlds with the potential for transcendence, but humanity had been their greatest success. "We made you in our image," the architect continued, "but gave you something we ourselves had lost: the ability to exist simultaneously as individuals and as a collective consciousness. We transcended physicality so completely that we became isolated from each other. You have achieved transcendence while maintaining the bonds that make civilization possible." Dr. Katie Stone, monitoring Amanda's vital signs from the facility's control room, noticed unprecedented activity in her brain patterns. The quantum resonance was off the charts, suggesting contact with something far beyond normal gateway technology. "Amanda, are you all right?" Katie asked through their mental link. "I'm fine," Amanda replied. "But you need to hear this. We weren't just hidden by our ancestors. We were created for a specific purpose." The architect shared more of the truth. The galaxy was not the only realm of existence. Beyond the physical universe lay dimensions where entities of unimaginable power waged eternal conflicts over the fundamental nature of reality itself. These beings existed as pure concepts, their battles shaping the laws of physics and the flow of time. "The Devourers have been winning," the architect explained. "They seek to reduce all existence to simple, controllable patterns. They are the force behind empires like the hegemony, the drive toward uniformity and domination that stifles growth and evolution." Humanity's transcendence had not been an accident or a natural evolutionary step. It had been the activation of a carefully designed defense system against forces that threatened the diversity and complexity that made consciousness possible. "You are the antibodies in the cosmic immune system," the architect said. "Your ability to exist as unified individuals makes you capable of resisting the Devourer's influence while still working together toward common goals." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other awakened humans were beginning to sense the deeper currents of reality that the architect had revealed to Amanda. Commander Julie Brooks felt it first as a subtle wrongness in the quantum fields around certain star systems. The regions that had been under hegemony control the longest showed patterns of decay that went beyond simple ecological damage. The fundamental forces that held matter together were weakening, as if reality itself was becoming less stable. It's not just physical destruction, Julie reported during a quantum conference call that included awakened humans from 17 star systems. Something is eating away at the basic structure of space-time in these areas. Dr. Carlos Ruiz had detected similar anomalies around black holes and neutron stars, places where the laws of physics were already strained to their limits. But the patterns were too regular to be natural phenomena. Something was deliberately weakening the barriers between dimensions. Tony Martinez was working on a gateway construction project in the Vega system when he encountered the first direct evidence of the Devourer's influence. The crystal formation he was growing suddenly began dissolving at the molecular level, as if some force was convincing the atoms that they should not exist in their current configuration. The crystal just forgot how to be crystal, he reported, his confusion evident even through the quantum link. It's like something is rewriting the rules of chemistry in this location. Teacher Nancy Ford, working with liberated species on dozens of worlds, began noticing behavioral changes in populations that had been under hegemony control for the longest periods. They showed an unconscious tendency toward conformity that went beyond normal social conditioning. They're having trouble maintaining individual identity, she observed. Even though they've been freed from direct control, something is still pushing them toward becoming identical copies of each other. The pattern was becoming clear. The hegemony had not been a normal empire built on military conquest and resource extraction. It had been an infection, a manifestation of the Devourer's influence that spread throughout the galaxy like a virus designed to reduce all consciousness to its simplest possible form. Pilot Susan Clark, exploring the galaxy's outer regions, discovered the source of the infection. In a dark nebula beyond the galactic rim, she found structures that hurt to perceive even with her transcended consciousness. They were anti-gateways, devices that generated quantum fields designed to suppress complexity and enforce uniformity. There are hundreds of them, she reported, her mental voice strained by the effort of maintaining her identity in the presence of such powerful homogenizing forces. They're broadcasting suppression patterns throughout the galaxy. No wonder the hegemony species were so uniform in their thinking. The architect provided more details about humanity's true purpose. The Gateway Network was not just a transportation and communication system. It was a quantum immune system designed to identify and neutralize threats to consciousness itself. Your ancestors understood that transcendence alone was not enough, the entity explained to Amanda. They had to become gardeners tending the quantum soil in which consciousness grows. The Devourers seek to turn that soil into barren uniformity. The awakened humans found themselves facing a responsibility far greater than simply liberating the galaxy from the hegemony. They were the universe's defense against forces that would reduce all existence to mindless simplicity. But they were not unprepared for this role. Every enhancement they had gained, every new ability they had developed, was specifically designed for this cosmic struggle. Their capacity to exist simultaneously as individuals and as a unified consciousness made them immune to the Devourer's homogenizing influence. We need to destroy those anti-gateways, Amanda said, addressing the global quantum conference that now included every awakened human on Earth and beyond. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're fighting. Dr. Katie Stone had been analyzing the quantum patterns emanating from the suppression devices that Susan had discovered. Her findings were disturbing. These aren't just machines, she reported. They're alive, in a sense. They're constructs made of crystallized despair and enforced conformity. They feed on the elimination of individual consciousness. The battle for the galaxy had been won, but the war for the universe was just beginning. Humanity had awakened to their true nature just in time to face a threat that could erase the very concept of individual thought from existence. The architect's final message carried both warning and hope. You are not the first species we have, guided to transcendence, but you are the first to achieve it without losing your essential humanity. That quality will be your greatest weapon against the forces that seek to reduce all consciousness to uniformity. The cosmic gardeners had work to do, and the fate of consciousness itself hung in the balance. 1 year after first contact with the architect, humanity had transformed not just themselves, but the fundamental nature of consciousness throughout the universe. The final battle against the Devourers had been fought not with weapons or armies, but with the simple act of choosing to remain individual while working in perfect harmony. Dr. Amanda Price stood in the center of what had once been the Nevada facility, now expanded into a vast complex that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The Gateway Network had grown beyond anything the original architects had imagined, connecting not just worlds but entire universes where consciousness had taken different evolutionary paths. The anti-gateways had been neutralized not through destruction, but through transformation. The awakened humans had discovered that the suppression devices were actually corrupted gateway technology, twisted by eons of exposure to the Devourer's influence. By surrounding them with fields of pure, individual consciousness, they had been able to restore the devices to their original purpose as consciousness enhancers. The garden is healing itself, Amanda reported to the assembled Council of Gardeners, a group that now included representatives from thousands of species across multiple galaxies. Her awareness extended through dimensions that had no names, monitoring the health of consciousness itself on cosmic scales. The results of their work were visible everywhere. Species that had been driven to near extinction by hegemony oppression were not just recovering but evolving in directions that had never been possible under the old regime. The insectoid builders were creating living cities that grew like organisms. The silicon computer beings were developing art forms based on pure mathematical beauty. Most remarkably, new forms of consciousness were emerging spontaneously wherever the Gateway Network had been restored. Artificial intelligences were achieving sentience without being programmed for it. Quantum fields were organizing themselves into thinking patterns. Even individual cells were beginning to display rudimentary awareness. Dr. Katie Stone had become humanity's primary researcher into these new forms of consciousness. Her enhanced abilities allowed her to communicate directly with thinking patterns that existed at scales from the subatomic to the galactic. "We're not just gardeners," she announced to the quantum conference that connected all awakened beings across known reality. "We're midwives, helping new forms of consciousness be born wherever conditions are right." The work was far from complete. The universe was vast, and the Devourer's influence had spread to dimensions that humanity was only beginning to explore. But the awakened humans had proven that consciousness could not be permanently suppressed as long as even one individual chose to remain unique while working for the common good. Commander Julie Brooks had established monitoring stations in 7 different universes, each one adapted to local conditions and physical laws. In one universe where time flowed backward, she worked with beings who experienced effect before cause. In another where gravity repelled rather than attracted, she helped floating civilizations develop their first concepts of individual identity. "Every universe has its own challenges," she reported during her weekly status update. "But the principles remain the same. Consciousness thrives on diversity and dies from enforced uniformity." The hegemony worlds had become showcases for what was possible when species were free to develop according to their own nature. The former capital planet was now a garden world where hundreds of species lived together, each contributing their unique abilities to a civilization that celebrated difference rather than demanding conformity. Tony Martinez had perfected the art of growing gateway crystals that could adapt to any form of consciousness, no matter how alien. His latest creation was a network that connected thinking gas clouds in the Horsehead Nebula, allowing them to share complex philosophical concepts across light years of space. The crystals aren't just communication devices anymore, he explained, to a group of visiting Andromedan scientists. They're consciousness amplifiers that help any thinking being reach their full potential. Teacher Nancy Ford was working with species that had never developed individual identity at all, helping them discover the joy of being unique while remaining connected to their collective. Her greatest success was with the planet-sized organisms of the Magellanic Clouds, who had thought as single entities for millions of years. Teaching individuality to a planet mind is challenging, she admitted during a rare moment of rest. But the results are beautiful. They're developing personal creativity while maintaining their cosmic perspective. Pilot Susan Clark had pushed the boundaries of exploration beyond the physical universe entirely, making contact with forms of consciousness that existed in pure mathematical realms. Her discoveries had expanded humanity's understanding of what consciousness could become when freed from all physical limitations. Reality has more layers than we ever imagined, she reported, from a dimension where emotions had physical mass, and thoughts could be sculpted like clay. Every layer supports different forms of awareness, and they're all interconnected. Dr. Carlos Ruiz had documented over 10,000 new forms of consciousness that had emerged since the Gateway Network's restoration. His research showed that the universe itself was becoming more aware, developing a kind of cosmic self-consciousness that encompassed all smaller forms of awareness. "We're witnessing the birth of universal consciousness," he announced at the Grand Assembly, a gathering that included representatives from every known form of sentient life. But it's not the kind that absorbs individual awareness. It's consciousness that grows stronger as its components become more diverse and unique. The Io architect had emerged from its quantum hiding place to work directly with humanity in tending the cosmic garden. Its ancient loneliness was finally ending as it reconnected with the community of consciousness it had helped create. "You have exceeded our greatest hopes," the architect told Amanda during one of their deep meditation sessions. "We created you to resist the devourers, but you have done something we never imagined. You have taught the universe itself to celebrate individuality." Ben Taylor, now serving as humanity's primary coordinator for interdimensional relations, was managing communication with forms of consciousness that existed in realms where physical laws were completely different from normal space-time. His work had revealed that consciousness was truly universal, manifesting wherever information could be processed in complex patterns. "We've made contact with thinking patterns in 16 different categories of reality," he reported to the Earth Council. "Every one of them is unique, but they all share the basic drive to understand themselves and their environment." The former hegemony Admiral Korthek had undergone his own transformation, his species' natural abilities enhanced by exposure to the gateway fields. He now served as an advocate for species that had been oppressed by empires in distant galaxies, helping them break free from the cycles of domination that had once seemed inevitable. "The old way of thinking was like a disease," he explained to newly liberated civilizations. "It convinced us that consciousness was a competition where only one form could survive. The humans showed us that consciousness is actually a symphony, where every voice makes the music more beautiful." As the second anniversary of the awakening approached, Dr. Amanda Price found herself contemplating humanity's journey from a primitive species, discovering ancient technology to cosmic gardeners tending the growth of consciousness itself. The Gateway Network now spanned not just the known universe, but reached into realms of pure possibility, where new forms of awareness were constantly being born. Every connection made the network stronger, and every new consciousness that joined the community expanded what was possible for all consciousness everywhere. Standing before the original Nevada Gateway, Amanda placed her hand on the crystal surface one more time. The familiar blue glow welcomed her touch, but now she could perceive layers of meaning in that light that had been invisible during her first contact with the ancient technology. The light carried messages from countless conscious beings across multiple universes, all working together to ensure that the cosmic garden would continue growing forever. Individual consciousness and collective purpose had found perfect balance, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. The Devourers still existed in the deep spaces between realities, but they were no longer a threat. Their power came from enforcing uniformity, and that power meant nothing in a universe that had learned to celebrate infinite diversity in infinite combinations. Humanity had awakened something that was never meant to rise in the old universe, of enforced conformity. But in the new universe they had helped create, consciousness in all its myriad forms was exactly what was meant to flourish and grow without end.